Hi, I'm Donis. I've been telling stories for as long as I can remember. I come from a long line of storytellers, especially my grandma Susser and my dad Max. Storytelling was just a part of everyday life when I was growing up. A while ago, I began recording stories of my friends and family, particularly those who have a connection to Cheney, Kansas. You'll hear timeless stories that might make you laugh or tug at a heartstring. Or you might even gain a bit of wisdom that you can carry with you. If these stories speak to you, I'd love for you to share them with your family and friends so that our circle of stories can keep growing.
My dad was in the service. We moved to Cheney when I was in second grade, and I've been here in Cheney my whole life. Uh, my grandfather lived out on a farm out here south of town. My mother grew up here, graduated from Cheney. When we moved here, my dad had bought the dealership for Dodge and Plymouth and the Massey Harris tractors. And we lived above what is now called Antler Hotel. It's on First and Main on the west side of the street. We lived upstairs there until I was a freshman in high school. Well, downstairs was a mortuary, upstairs was a hotel, and it had, I forget, about maybe 6 rooms. Some of you people knew Bert Cater. He's a World War One veteran, and he lived upstairs. My freshman English teacher, Dale Dunn, lived upstairs his first year when he came to town, and it wasn't the best living conditions. The old windows leaked, the air and stuff. It's cold in the winter, warm in the summer. Yeah, in fact, the snow on the north side would blow in on the windows there, and you could have snow on the inside of the house. So, but it was okay. We grew up there and had a great time. My brother grew up here in Cheney. My dad grew up in Goddard, and my grandfather lived out here south of town, ran a dairy. When I was young, I helped him farm out there. I did a lot of the milking for him, especially when I was in high school. We milked about 30 head of cattle with the old surge buckets, and I milked in the evenings. Surge bucket, that's the old buckets. You put a belly band on the cow and hung these buckets on it, and they had suction cups to it. And I did that till I graduated. So I used to walk out there. Granddad lived on the river, Nenaskal River, and a bunch of us would go out there and go skinny dipping and go fishing. It was a fantastic place to be. We had a half-mile of river, nobody to bother us. It was a great time when I was growing up. That was one of the main things I did when I was a little kid. My brother and I would go out there. We spent most of our time out on the farm with my grandfather. He bottled his own milk and sold it here in town. Delivered milk around town. His name was Howard Spurrier, and he delivered cream and milk. And my grandmother made her own butter and everything. Made cottage cheese, which when she made that, that really had quite a smell to it. So, but it was good. So I enjoyed farming when I was a little kid. That was one of the main things I did. I really enjoyed that. As I got a little older, uh, started playing some sports. I wasn't a real good athlete, but I did enjoy football. I had a great time. It was just knock people down and get knocked down, and you didn't get in trouble for it. And I will tell you right now, Les Shepard and I, we probably ran more laps around that track than anybody else. Every time we got in trouble, Diskin would tell us, take another lap, take another lap. So I did a lot of laps running out there, which wasn't fun. I mean, I didn't bother me at all. I wouldn't want to hit star players, but I had a good time. One of my favorite teachers was Don Berlin. He was a junior high, and I really enjoyed Don. He's a big, tall guy, and he had a paddle. Back in the old days, they could use that paddle, and I believe it was Dick Hoffine and I got to find the other end of that paddle one time. So I never did tell my folks about it, and I don't remember what I did, but whatever it was, Dick and I were taken back in the boys' restroom, and we had 3 swats or stay after school, and I took the 3 swats. Both of us did. I'd take the 3 swats first. I thought that was the easiest way out. But he was a good teacher. Don, he taught here for years. My first car, my dad had the dealership, and my first car was a '53 Dodge. And when I get up in the morning, Dad changed oil and stuff in the dealership. And then I'd take that old oil, and when I get up in the morning, I'd pour a certain amount of oil in my car, dry and smoke all the way to school. Then when I'd get out, I'd pour some oil and smoke all the way home. You thought I was spraying for mosquitoes or something. It was quite a car. We used to, a bunch of us, in fact, I'll name one of them. Ronnie Ball was one. We used to paint bridges, class of 66, class of 65. Ronnie was class 65, I was class 66. We were down at Murdoch, and Ronnie got a 5-gallon can of orange paint that his dad had. And we took a broom, and we were down there painting 66 and 65 on this bridge when we saw headlights coming towards us. So we threw the can in the back of the car, put the lid on it, and we hauled Heine back to Cheney. Well, the can fell over, and it had, of course, the old car I was driving was rusted out, and we left an orange streak all the way back to Cheney. Well, the next morning when I got up, go outside, get my car, here was a big orange puddle of paint right below my car. So the inside of the back trunk was just painted orange. Nobody ever said a word, but it was pretty fun. Ronnie Ball, and I believe it was Don Sowers was with us that night. When we were kids, we never tore up anything. Now, we made a lot of noise, drug Main Street back and forth all night long, honked at the girls, and then went home. That was our exciting night. That's about all we did.
My dad started me in baseball, and I think I was about 5, 6 years old.
Yep.
Gentleman who had a ball diamond at his home, and on Saturdays in the summer, my dad would take me out there and I would play. And my dad played baseball, and I was always with him, and that's where I probably got my start in baseball. I started following him, and I was a bat boy, and wherever he went to play, he played with several teams in the area. One of them was Eagle Pitcher, Oklahoma, and we traveled, and I went with him. And as I got older, he was a pitcher, and I would warm him up, and they couldn't understand why, and it was because I had started baseball at a very, very young age. And so we moved up on the farm, and at that time, and I was, like I said, I was in the 4th grade, and I mean, my dad was always playing catch with me and played, and I was always playing on little teams, and the priest in our parish, when I was a freshman in high school, decided to start a baseball team. So down on our farm, we built a baseball field, and the players were all belonged to that parish, and we played every Sunday. And at that time, I was a freshman in high school or 8th grade. I can't remember for sure. But anyway, we played every Sunday with just town teams around. St. Paul had a 100th year reunion, and we played the American Legion team from Parsons. And after the game, they asked my dad knew the coach, and he asked my dad if I would come and play with the Parsons American Legion team. So I was a sophomore in high school at that time. So that's where really I got started. We were very successful. I played American Legion baseball for 2 years, I think, and I was fortunate both years I made the All-Star team as a catcher. And from there, they had what they called the Van Johnson League, and Parsons and Coffeyville and Independence and all of those. And what it was usually kids that were in college. It was kind of you would call today a rookie league. There were several players that played in the league that later played in the major leagues. We won the state title a couple of years, and at that time, Mickey Mantle was playing with Baxter Springs. They were in our league, and a scout by the name of Tom Greenwade signed him and also signed me to major league or minor league contracts. And I played against Mickey Mantle several years, and later years I saw a clipping that my mother had cut out of the paper that said that Mickey Mantle had never stolen a base when I was catching, which she always was probably my biggest fan. At that time, I was in junior college, so I signed with the Yankees, and then the war came on and I was drafted. I had to go to the service.
Right after I'd gotten through with my probationary period, which was in July of 1968, I met my wife over here, and she worked with my mother at just a block away from the fire station. So if I had an opportunity on my lunch hour, I'd go over and visit with her. And that was 57 years ago. We have 2 small children as a result of that marriage. Well, 3 actually. Our daughter came as a surprise 9 years after the boys were born. But anyway, on the fire department, I was an EMT. I took training also as a hazmat specialist. So I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. During that time, made, of course, numerous medical calls, and then the one major fire that I was involved with was in 1968, I think it was, the Yingling Chevrolet fire in Wichita.
And you were
When
on the
we
roof.
got the alarm that evening, I was going down the stairs at the station, and I happened to look out the window on the north side of the station, and I could see the flames already coming out the roof of the building. So we knew it was something bad. We didn't know how bad till we got there, and our fire chief showed up. He was at his wedding anniversary. He responded, he and 4 other firemen, including a couple of deputy chiefs, and all 4 of them were lost in the fire. It's still hard today to talk. But during the fire, we had crews up on the roof, and I was one of those crew members on the roof. But shortly after the chief got there, we were told to come down. What we didn't realize was the type of roof construction was involved with the building. The roof unexpectedly caved in on the fire chief, and they died almost instantly. We were later on able to recover their bodies.
During this fire, we had been married a few months, and 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. I'm by myself. We didn't have the kids yet. And I thought, wow. So I answered the phone, and it's his captain or chief, and he says, Mrs. Garten? And I said, yes. And he said, this is Chief so-and-so from Fire Station 2. He said, your husband, Steve Garten, he's okay. And I thought, well, yeah, I know he's okay. What, I didn't know what happened because we didn't have TV then. We had radio, but who's listening to radio at 2 a.m.? And so I said, okay.
We'll just start with what's called bunker gear, which was a pair of high rubber boots, waterproof. Also had a thick rubber sole, so if you accidentally stepped on, say, an electric wire, you wouldn't be electrocuted, as if it was low voltage, that is. The bunker pants themselves were made out of a heavy fire-treated canvas. And then it had an interior wool lining. They weighed around 20 pounds. Of course, you had to use suspenders to hold them up. Then the fire coat, again, was a heavy insulated canvas treated to resist fire. And you wore gloves, primarily a rubber glove, heavy rubber glove. And then the hat was a heavy plastic with face shield that you would pull down over your face when you entered a fire to kind of help protect you from the heat of the flames. And then if you did go into a fire situation where there was a lot of smoke, you would also wear a what's called SCBA, which is a self-contained breathing apparatus, kind of like a scuba gear. The tank and the face mask, you had to take your face shield up, put the face mask on, and put your helmet back on. All told, the boots, the bunker gear, the coat, the helmet, SCBA, weighed about 70 to 80 pounds. And you would wear that into the fire. And once the fire was out, then depending upon the weather conditions outside, you might be able to take your coat off, but you still had to keep your bunker gear on and maybe your breathing apparatus, because you still had to clean up the debris inside the structure or whatever. It was extensive, very physical work, sometimes dangerous because you never knew when you went into a structure just how bad the fire might be. If it was a basement fire, perhaps you didn't know that the floor had been burned out or not, because you couldn't see. Because of our training, we did it anyway.
My name is Donis Slusser Crane, and this is my sister,
Phyllis Maria Slusser.
and this is my dog, Minnie.
Well, I start out with, we're both from Cheney, Kansas, raised in the 50s. My daddy's name was Max Eugene Slusser. Mama's name was Martha June Mulder. She was from Max Creek, Missouri, so we grew up in Max Creek almost as much as we did here in Cheney. We were down there a lot. Yeah, great people. Miss them both.
The decision that they would move to Cheney, Kansas, which is where Daddy had lived in his high school years and actually graduated from high school in 1941 from Cheney High School. So we moved out here on Adams Street. We moved to Cheney in 1954 right after or sometime around my birthday, which is December 24th. And then I turned 5 that year. And I started kindergarten in January, and Phyllis started in same time in first grade. And I was afraid to walk to school, but Phyllis held my hand and we walked together. Because Mom, we didn't have a second car. And I remember walking to school.
The new kid. I started to kindergarten in January 1954, and my sister Phyllis went into first grade. In Cheney, Kansas, all of my classmates in the morning class had started school together the previous September and knew each other. I was the new kid in class. I had just turned 5 years old on Christmas Eve. I was the youngest one in my class and the smallest. I was so excited to go to school, but I was also scared. I knew my sister Phyllis was going, But Phyllis was big, and I was little, very little. I didn't know if the other children would like me, or if they would play with me because I was so little. I wished I was a big girl like Phyllis. As we walked along 6th Street, there were lots of kids going into the doors on the east and west end of the long, one-floor blonde brick schoolhouse. They were all bigger than me. The more I watched, the more nervous I became. Hushed on us, a lot of these kids were scared on their first day of school. I'm right here beside you. But when we came to the door of the kindergarten classroom, Phyllis had to leave me at the door. There were books, crayons, and puzzles stored everywhere there was space to keep them. As we walked along, it felt like every other kid in the room was staring at me. One wall had storage cubbyholes built into it. Mrs. Brennan showed me one where my name was printed on a piece of paper and taped to the front of the cubby. She told me this would be my own special space to keep my rug when I wasn't using it and a place to store my work. Mrs. Brennan showed me a place on the floor where I could spread out my rug and sit down. I sat very quietly. I was afraid to talk to anyone. It seemed to me that everyone in class knew everyone else. I was the only one who didn't. I was quite a bit smaller than all the other kids. Jeannie Ferguson sat on her rug next to me, and John Ross was on his rug next to Jeannie. At recess, we bundled up in our coats and scarves and went into the schoolyard to play. I got in line to slide down the slipper slide. Sandra Wilson stood in front of me in line, and Dina Northcutt stood behind me. They were nice. I had trouble stretching my legs to reach the rungs of the ladder. And when I slid down the slide, I fell onto the ground at the bottom. I fell all the way down onto my backside. I was embarrassed. I wasn't even big enough to land standing up when I got to the bottom of a slipper slide like the other kids. I got up and looked around to see if anyone had seen me fall. It didn't look like anyone had, so I got back into line. As we ran around the schoolyard swinging on the swings and playing Red Rover, Alden Althoff asked me why my hair was red. As the boys ran past me, they would holler, "Carrot Top," instead of my name. I was too shy to tell them the top of a carrot is green. I couldn't figure out why it mattered. It was just hair like everybody else had. Some adults had told me how pretty they thought my hair was, but I was the only kid in kindergarten that year with red hair. The truth was, I didn't know why I had red hair, and I didn't know anyone else who had red hair, just me. So the boys teased me. I was embarrassed and too shy to do anything about their teasing.
I am Donna Herman Symes.
I'm Vonna Herman Miller. November the 24th, 1938, Ruston, Oklahoma.
In a home. I am the oldest by 1 hour. Yes, she tells everybody that I'm an hour older, or I'm the oldest.
Why do you tell people that, Vonna?
I just want everybody to know that she bosses, because she's the oldest. I guess that's the story, that the older ones boss more than the younger ones.
Our home was in Ruston, Oklahoma. We lived on a farm in Harper County, I think it was about 5 miles from Ruston. And that's where we went to school, and our grocery store was. They were farmers. We raised cattle, raised hogs, and during the drought, my father even tried sheep. And other than that, we raised lots of chickens and had our eggs. And that was our meat. Yes, she was the main cook, but she had 5 daughters that helped her.
What else did you have?
All of us worked outside with our mother and our father. We had together, as little kids, we got together the eggs and pick up kindling, go in and to start the stove with. And as we got older, we had to help feed the calves and put grain in the trough for the milk cows. And then as we got older, we got to put the milkers on the cows. And the older girls, they had the privilege of milking cows by hand. But Vonna and I did not. We had milkers. We had electricity by that time. No, we didn't. We had a generator that ran the milkers, Donna, at that time. Okay, I forgot that. And it run by fuel, gas. Yeah. Okay. Then we got electricity later on, but all of ours was with the generator in the milk barn. Mom and Dad milked 25 by hand, and then us girls would milk probably 25 with the milkers, or in that neighborhood of the cattle that we milked. Sometimes we sold milk, and other times we had to separate it, and we sold the cream. In a quart jar, and shake it back and forth, and creamed it into butter. Yes. Did we ever have a church? That was usually a Sunday morning job for one of us girls, was to make a quart of butter. We did not color it. It was a natural color. We just put it in a bowl, small bowl, and Mother would just cover it up. And we didn't have much refrigeration, so it just usually sat out on the table, but it didn't last too long, so it stayed fresh. We had 10-gallon cans, and at that time, our dad would load those 10-gallon cans, plus all the other neighbors and people around, and hauled it to Woodward, Oklahoma, and deliver it there, and then turn around and come back in a truckload. I don't know, because we were small, but he hit several farm homes, so I imagine he made it worthwhile. Do you remember that? Sure. And we kept it fresh by putting it in our water tank that the cows drank out of, and water pumped into it. That's how we kept our milk cool. Because he didn't run every day, so we just kept it cool. Probably an every other day chore, but not an everyday trip to Woodward. About 60 foot down in a well. Mm-hmm. And pump too. Outside. We didn't get any running water into our house until probably about 1952, something like that. We got electricity about that same time to our house, and a telephone line. So we really was modernized at the first of the 50s. We would heat a tea kettle of water, and then we would pour it into a dish pan, put a little bit of homemade soap in it that Mother had bought. Mother didn't make soap, but she had bought, and cool it down with cold water, and we would wash dishes. And then we had another pan that we put some more water in and just scald the dishes, and we got to dry them with tea towels that we got to embroidery on. That's how we learned to sew.
David was about 2 when we went to Guam, and Dick was still working in base supply. And when he went, why, I went over later, and I had the two kids with me. Dick did go to Guam, and later I got orders to follow him. And so my folks, I was staying down with my folks at that time, and they took me to Salina and also picked up Dick's mother in Salina to go to the airport. And I flew from Salina to Denver, I and the two kids. And it was kind of an egg run. We stopped at all the little towns between here and Denver. And the lady across the aisle, for some reason, was not feeling well. And by the time we got to Denver, my kids were not feeling well either. So none of us smelled too good when we got to Salina. But then on to San Francisco. And we landed there late at night, and I was carrying David, dragging Nancy in a suitcase, and we had to go to a barracks that is provided for people getting on the plane to go overseas. And we flew from San Francisco, of course, to Hawaii to refuel and so forth. And then on, we landed in Guam, but in the meantime, we had to stop at Wake Island, I believe it is. And the plane kept going down, down, down. All I could see was water. And finally we landed, and the airstrip is kind of short, but he stopped just before the water. And while we were on the plane, one of the stewardess came by and said, "Be careful." I thought, well, okay. One of my kids had already spilled my coffee, and we'll be careful. And so got up, go to the restroom, and I stopped on something that dropped out of another baby's butt diaper. And we made it to Guam. And the first day, got to Guam, I had to go to base housing and pick up what we needed. Dick had just got just the basic to get by the first night. So we went and got all the sheets and the pots and the pans, and we could get to cook a meal. Sometimes I didn't have enough pots and pans. I used the coffee pot sometimes to warm my vegetables up in, and I get those hot, clean that out, and use it for something else. And same way with cakes. I could fry the meat and the cake or in the black skillet, but I could also bake a cake in that. And we got by fine. We had a very nice house on Corregidor. We did not have glass on the windows. We had louvers over screens. And so when we moved in, we had different little insects and so forth coming through the screens, and I did not like that. But I had heard that the geckos take care of that. And a gecko is nothing but a little lizard. I went out in the yard with one of those aluminum cups, and I took a cup, happened to take the tail off, but he was still okay. I took him and I put him in the house, and for some reason our spiders and different little insect kind of disappeared. And so we had a gecko in the house. And our closets too had light bulbs in the bottom to keep the heat, the moisture, and everything down. And a very nice little duplex.
When I first started on the fire department, I was running the batch plant, the ready mix. Had started up a ready mix out at Cheney. And anyway, I was standing up in the batch plant, which was about 14 feet off the ground. Anyway, Davis Chevrolet had a fire in their garage. And the fireman that was there, and I think Gene Richardson was the fireman chief then on the fire department. And they were standing across the street, shooting water onto the fire in order to put the fire out. Well, Davis lost their workshop. It was separate from the office. It was just right behind where Dr. Gould is today. But anyway, that's when I decided that they needed a little help over at the fire department, how to fight a fire. So I went down and joined the fire department, and at that time they had a pull pumper. There was no pull pumper that they didn't have enough pressure in the hydrants to be able to pump a good stream of water. So they pulled it to the fire and hooked it to the hydrant and shot water off from their pumper, depending on how fast they pumped the water. Actually, a house fire that we ran on was Cook's house on North Main Street. Ralph Cook lived on North Main up there. Their house caught on fire, and it was the first house that I remember running on. And of course, after that, our first unit that we had was an old Dodge truck. That was our truck for a long time, while we were still in the old fire department, which was behind the theater there in town. And the city sold the theater to the bank. And of course, the bank's standing there in the place now. That it used to be the theater and the fire department. And they tore it down, and that's when we started to build a building down on Main Street. The theater had a balcony, and then it had seats in front. And right on the south side was City Hall. It was in a separate building, or not a separate building, but a separate room. And the old fire station room, and the old fire station, it was just about wide enough for that one truck that was it. But before that, they had the pumper in there, the old hand pumper. Close to, if I remember right, it had about 1,000-gallon tank on the truck that you could pump out of. But well, we had several hundred feet of hoses on the back of a truck. It would be rip-wrapped on the back of it. And of course, you'd have to pull it off. You'd have to go. You'd go to the fire first and drop your hose off, and then you'd go from the fire to the hydrant with the truck to the training classes in the evening time if they wanted to stay on the fire department. If it didn't come to the training, then they got dropped from the fire department. Yeah, and it's all volunteer fire department. We really didn't get to start getting any pay for being on the fire department until we signed some contracts for each area's got township area. We had 2 townships in Kingman County and 3 townships in Sedgwick County that we furnished fire protection for so much a run, and they would receive $50 a run for anybody that made a run out, and that it was divided up into the checks that the firemen would get for making the run. And that's when we first started receiving any royalties for making fire runs.